African cardinals are among the favourites to be the next head of the Catholic Church. Or it might be Pier Battista Pizzaballa. Some say the favourite never wins at conclave. What is certain about this ancient ritual is that the Pope won't be a woman.
In the Church's seat of power, where the patriarchy reigns, women icons loom large.
Icons, yes, but live women? Only in the background. To many, that is unacceptable.
The Church cannot ordain women as priests.
The Pope has forbidden women's ordination and has even forbidden people to discuss the topic. They can't have the Church. The hierarchy cannot have it. It is our Church.
I'm as much a Catholic as the Pope is.
So, will we ever see a woman Pope leading the 1.4 billion Catholics around the world?
It's a glacial pace of change. It truly is glacial, yeah.
I'm Sharon Brett-Kelly, and today on The Detail, the role of women in the Catholic Church. We'll hear from two Catholic women, both with deep faiths, but with very different experiences of the Church in New Zealand.
Amongst my peers, amongst those I grew up with, we've seen the priesthood as a way to serve, but it's only one way to serve.
The Anglican Church and other churches have women in leadership, and the sky hasn't fallen in.
But first, the history.
The name is Brona Ann McShane, and I am a research fellow on the Voices project in Trinity College, Dublin.
What is the Voices project?
So it's a project about the voices and experiences of women living in Ireland in the 16th and 17th century. So I have a book published about Irish women in religious orders between 1530 and 1700. And I've become more interested in the role of women in the Catholic Church and what that now looks like in the contemporary age. So what's the role of women in the Church today, and where do we go from here, and how do we understand that in the long history of the Church?
How would you describe the place of women in the Catholic Church today?
I would describe it as quite, I suppose, paradoxical in a lot of ways. On the one hand, we know that women make up the majority of the Church's global membership today, and they are really essential to many aspects of its functioning. They lead schools and hospitals, they serve as theologians, educators, missionaries. They hold together parish life in communities across the globe. And many religious orders of women, of course, do extraordinary pastoral and social work. Yet, when it comes to formal positions of governance and sacramental authority, the Church really remains profoundly hierarchical and male-dominated. So, for example, women can't be ordained as priests or even as deacons as things stand. Most Vatican departments, known as dicasteries, are still led by men. Though, as I've pointed out in the article, that did slowly begin to shift under Pope Francis. So it is an institutional dependence, I suppose, but without the corresponding power.
But it wasn't always like this, was it? In early Christianity, women had those leadership roles.
I think the marginalisation of women in church leadership was certainly not inevitable, but it was likely a product of several historical shifts. So, as Christianity moved from being on the margins of society, being a persecuted minority religion, to then become the religion of the Roman Empire, it necessarily had to adopt more rigid structures. Bishops became administrators of cities and clergy became public figures. And women were then systematically excluded from those positions of authority. And I suppose this just reflected that broader patriarchal social norms of society at the time.
During his 12-year papacy, Francis appointed around 20 women to positions of authority in the Vatican. That, while perhaps slow progress, is simply unprecedented in a male-dominated church.
Of course, today there are a few cases of women in positions of power. You write about Sister Raffaella Petrini. She has the highest position of power of any woman in the Catholic Church today.
Yeah, so Sister Petrini is a very interesting and important example of the elevation of women to leadership roles within the church during the pontificate of Francis. She's a very well educated, highly educated woman. She's an economist by training. She holds a doctorate, and she's a member of the Franciscan Sisters of the Eucharist. And in one of Pope Francis's most early appointments of women to these high-ranking leadership roles within the Vatican State Church, he appointed Petrini as Secretary General of the Governorate of Vatican City, which effectively at that time made her the second highest official in that department and meant that she was responsible for the day-to-day administration of the Vatican. Now, clearly she did a very good job in that role, because in what was one of his last major appointments before he died, on the 15th of February 2025, Pope Francis appointed her as president of that governorate of Vatican City, an appointment which became effective from the 1st of March. So that was really a significant appointment, making her the highest ranking individual and the highest ranking woman ever to lead a Vatican department. But it's important to remember now that with the death of Pope Francis, all Vatican prefects resigned their jobs, with a few exceptions, and no new curial heads are appointed until a successor is elected. So it could mean that Petrini's post ends up being a remarkably short term, because, as I say, it only became effective as of the 1st of March. So we await to see what the next successor will do in terms of whether Petrini is reinstated to her post or if somebody else is appointed to the role.
Unlike those before him, the Pope fought to elevate women, seeking their worth within the Vatican. When women are in charge, things work, he said, just days before he died.
There are a few other women in positions not of power. Well, I mean, are they positions of power? I don't know. But I'm just wondering, how have they got there? I mean, do they have to fight for it, or do they quietly work their way up? What do you know about that?
I suppose it's varied and it depends from individual to individual. We know in the case of Petrini, she has spent decades working within church institutions. Others, I suppose, have had to advocate more publicly, especially when challenging entrenched norms. But what's common, though, is that none of these women were handed power easily. You know, even in religious life where women lead their own communities, they often operate under male ecclesiastical oversight. And many of them who rise to senior roles, like Sister Natalie Beckhart, who is now Under Secretary of the Synod.
Well, I think it was a very symbolic gesture from Pope Francis, appointed me as a woman in this role. Before, it has always been a bishop, not because women are better, but because when we are together as men and women, usually we work better, we take better decisions.
She has had to navigate a delicate balance between, you know, being outspoken, but also diplomatically persistent. So there's also a generational dimension to this. Younger Catholic women today are perhaps less willing to accept silence or symbolic gestures. They want real voice, real participation and recognition. So even in many ways, a quiet path is still a long negotiation with a system that ultimately isn't built for the representation of women.
Women can be priests. Don't kick the can.
We know about the white and black smoke of conclave, but what about pink smoke over the Vatican? That was the name of a 2011 documentary about the women wanting to be ordained as priests.
This is the same as the apartheid laws.
I was afraid when I first started to speak out.
They have threatened some of the women with the loss of their immortal souls.
In New Zealand, one of those agitating for decades for equality is Hamilton's Christina Raymer. She's part of the group Be the Change.
It is a significant issue of human rights, and we've got to the point now where we're saying blatantly sexism is a sin and this is a sin, and there is no legitimate reason for discriminating against women just because they are women. God created us all equally, male and female. God created them. That's quote from Genesis. And so God does not distinguish, and I think she is getting tired of being referred to in male terms as well. The truth is that the church has just imploded. And if you look at what's happened in the church in Ireland, but in the West globally, people have just left in droves because it is no longer relevant. I've got 5 children who are adults. The only one who wants to go to church still is the one who wants a Latin Mass. The others have left it completely and say, why would you go to an organisation that will tell you what to believe?
Are you saying this is because it's so dominated by men?
Absolutely, yes. We experience that in so many ways. Mary McAleer she's past president of Ireland and has a doctorate in Gregorian canon law, and she describes it as a bird trying to fly with one wing, and that's what the church is doing. We are simply not allowing ourselves to bring forward the feminine side of the church, of who we are as humanity, and it's trying to fly with one wing, and it can't do that.
In New Zealand, so you've been active in trying to change things. What have you tried to do?
In the 80s and 90s, I was very involved with Sophia groups, and we used to call it a Catholic feminist group if that wasn't a contradiction in terms, well, quite clearly it is a contradiction, and certainly in terms of the structures of the time. We've now got to the point where our group is called Be the Change, where we simply want to be the change that we want. We're not waiting anymore. We're not asking for permission if we can celebrate Eucharist together as women around a table. So it's not waiting for permission, but one day hopefully we will get recognition, because we feel, most of us, in various places in terms of affiliation or practice with the regular church, some of us are still might go to Mass on Sundays or occasionally, and others have left it completely, but they still feel in their heart that they are Catholic.
So what does that mean if people in your group don't go to church, but they want to celebrate being Catholic, as you say?
Right.
Is it about having your own version of a Mass somewhere else?
Yes, we do. We have our own inclusive Eucharistic liturgies, and we're not the only ones. It was COVID, I guess, that connected us, and we found that there are similar groups, inclusive Catholics, welcoming Catholics, Catholic women, and so on, globally, all over the place. Hundreds of these groups, thousands in fact. And when I was in the US, I went to Catholic Women's Ordination Conference in 2015 in Philadelphia. There was this massive room full of 500 people and at least 100 Catholic women priests, and I felt, what, a real live Catholic woman priest? How do you get to be that? And so on.
So why don't we have that in New Zealand?
Well, just that opportunity has just never kind of presented itself, or women haven't quite felt supported. I know there are women in New Zealand who have felt a calling to priesthood, and some of them have gone sideways and said, well, okay, I'll join the Anglican Church. Others have just harboured that calling and feel like it's an unfulfilled calling of theirs.
But have you tried to talk to the hierarchy about this?
Absolutely, yes, we have. It's been initiated by Pope Francis with the Synod on Synodality, which is this consultation that's happened over the last 3 years and ended with the second meeting in Rome in October 2023. That got us thinking about, well, okay, what can we do to raise the voice for women? And we initiated this Pink Shoes into the Vatican campaign, which was suggesting that, well, the Pope wears red shoes. What about if they were pink high-heeled shoes that the Pope might be wearing? So just kind of a little bit facetious, but also, it was drawing on what happened at the conclave that gave us Pope Francis in 2013, where there was a group of Women's Ordination Conference throwing up pink smoke, not white smoke or black smoke.
There's been a documentary about it,
That's right.
There?
There's pink smoke over the Vatican. So we thought, well, pink smoke, we can do pink shoes into the Vatican. And we collected women's worn-out shoes with their stories of their experience of being women in the church. And so, and they were heartfelt stories of given my life to the church, or worked in the church, or raised so many children and still feel like I'm a second-class citizen. It's like, oh, thank you very much. It's,
what's
praying
the
the Hail Mary.
What has been, have you actually had, official meetings, formal meetings?
Well, we did it in 2022 to coincide with women's suffrage, and we had the shoes lining the footpath all the way from Kate's Suffrage Suffrage Memorial, down Queen Street, then up Wynyard Street to the steps of the cathedral where the doors were closed for us. And we actually met with Bishop Steve and talked to him about that.
So he supports more
Yes.
power to the women.
We gave him a beautiful pair of pink shoes with a woman's story, and he says that I still have those on my office desk and as a poignant reminder of the status of women in the church, and that this is something that we need to address.
So you want to stay with the Catholic Church even though you've had years of frustration of trying to bring in change. Why bother with the church? Why not go to the Anglican Church?
And I totally respect that. But I just kind of feel it's like my whakapapa. I'm also passionate about family history, and I know my family history, which is a Dutch background. But our family goes back Catholic 500 years. It's in my DNA. I feel like I have to honour them and my forebears. And I don't think we want to underestimate how significant the church is. It's the largest non-government organisation globally. The Catholic Church is in every single country in the world.
And Christina was talking there about Stephen Lowe, Bishop of Auckland, with the pink shoes on his desk. Let's go to Vicky Surrey in Christchurch, mum of 3 girls and the Evangelisation and Discipleship Coordinator at Holy Family Parish.
I've been at this parish and in this role for the last 5 years, and a number of other roles, both in Christchurch and other parts of the country as well, and other parts of the church. And what I can definitely say is I have always felt really respected for what I bring to the table. The areas where I have strengths or training, I always feel that my voice is heard. Of course, being a woman and a mum, I can share a perspective on life that is perhaps different from some of our clergy. And often that's what I find. I get questions around that, like, well, this idea that we're thinking about, will that work for families, or will that work for married couples, or is that going to be good for the children? Because I have those experiences. My early training was in youth ministry, and then I went on later to do a degree in theology, and have had a number of pastoral roles in the church. And so I've had so many strong women in my life who've played all sorts of roles within the church. So that's been modelled to me from very early on.
So do you think that there are equal amounts of influence and responsibility for men and women?
I think equality is a really difficult term. I don't want to be seen as the same as everybody else. We each bring something different. So I think we have to be careful with the word equality. I do feel that our lay men and women have a real strong voice and are well respected, and it's very common now. You might start hearing amongst the church a term senior leadership team. It's the way that some of our parishes refer to things now. It's a kind of new structure that we're developing where our priests are saying, we want you to collaborate with us. I don't have all the gifts. I don't have all of the skills. I need people around me who are going to support me in my leadership. So I'm careful with the term equality because I'm not necessarily looking for equality. I don't want to be the same, seem completely the same, because I'm unique in the gifts that I bring.
But I guess what I'm trying to find out from you is the women in the church, the females in the church, do they have the same presence in terms of the decision making and even being seen as leaders as the men do?
Oh, absolutely. There is a presence of women in decision making. So I've just come from a senior leadership team meeting this morning, and we have 3 women and 3 men who sit on that. 2 of those men are clergy, 1 is a layman. They're very much a part and parcel of that conversation, and we have some good, robust discussions where everybody contributes. So there are women involved in many levels, and all of our lay staff are women.
So are you happy with the way things are at the moment? Because let's face it, it is not equal. The Catholic Church is very male dominant.
Well, definitely. We see a lot of men present in the church because they are part of our ministerial priesthood, and it is the priesthood that makes present the Eucharist to us in our services at Mass each Sunday. So, of course, we're doing this in light of the conclave coming up, and we know our Pope will be a man. So, of course, there is definitely a strong presence of men in the church. And the funny thing is that because it's the ministerial priesthood, doesn't make me feel any less. My husband and I are both Catholic, and I think he and I would both equally see that we have a voice as lay Catholics So there's that differentiation between those involved as lay members of the church versus those involved in the ministerial priesthood. Now, the ministerial priesthood is reserved for men, but in every other way, as a layperson, I don't feel lesser or more than my husband. And yeah, I am very happy with it. I have no desire to be a priest. I have to take my hat off to those in other faiths who maintain a family and minister.
But shouldn't there be the opportunity for women to become priests and even for a woman to be the Pope?
I think one of the things, one of our understandings in the Catholic Church is that those in the ministerial priesthood act, as we would say in Latin, in persona Christi, in the person of Christ. And that is one of the reasons it is reserved to the men. And I don't know, I've always grown up with an understanding that we each have a role in life. And I know there's certainly been times when there's been a really strong feeling that women should be allowed to be part of the ministerial priesthood. But actually, amongst my peers, amongst those I grew up with, we've seen the priesthood as a way to serve, but it's only one way to serve. It's not really about power or authority. It's about service.
What about, though, these images that we're seeing now of the Pope's funeral, conclave? It is very male dominant. And I'm just wondering, what sort of message does this send to women and girls?
Oh, it's interesting. I have 3 daughters, and they were very interested to hear that I was going to be chatting with you today. And I sat and talked with them, and it's really interesting because they really have no sense that they're missing out in a way. I mean, we watched the funeral together and they were like, oh, that's a lot of priests. That's a lot of cardinals. They expected them to be men because that's what they've always known. But I don't think they have a sense that they're missing out on something because at every level of the church, even right into the Vatican, they see their aunts, their grandmothers involved at every level of the church. And while we are a universal church, we're also a very particular church. So their experience is probably more here in Christchurch and in their own parish. And they, even at a young age, my oldest girl is only 14, are involved in leading a music ministry. They go to a youth group where they have young women leaders. And so I don't think they get any sense that in the church they're not wanted or they can't have a role or a place.
No, so yeah, I understand that. But the Mass, the Sunday Mass, is led by a male. It's the priest up on the altar. And I know that there's the argument, there's lay people involved in all sorts of things. But it is still that man standing on the altar in his robes who is leading the whole thing. And you're not honestly, that doesn't bother you?
That doesn't bother me in the slightest.
And it doesn't bother your daughters?
No. He's acting in persona Christi. So in some way that makes sense when he says the words of institution. In our mind, we are thinking of Christ, and Christ was a man. And so it really doesn't bother me. And I think the thing for our girls, is that often the readers were both women. My girls serve on the altar, so they are altar servers. So they serve along boys and girls. We just see it as another way of service, and we feel blessed by those who give, because they really give of themselves in a significant way.
As for the next Pope, Brona reckons we'll have one by the end of the week. Will there be a woman Pope in her lifetime?
As much as I would like to say yes, Sharon, with my historian's hat on again and knowing the glacial pace of change within the Catholic Church as an institution, I would have to say no, sadly.
What about a woman priest?
That's potentially more of a possibility. Although in saying that, the commissions established by Francis around just the question of women deacons, which is the level kind of below, I suppose, the priestly ordination, convened by Francis 2016, we are still debating that question in relation to women as deacons. So it's a long, long road ahead.
What about priests marrying?
Francis did speak about that, and I really don't think that is going to change anytime soon. It has been debated, obviously, but I don't think that the Church is willing to open up clerical celibacy.
That's it for today. The Detail is a Newsroom production supported by RNZ and NZ On Air. Thanks to Brona Ann McShane, Vicky Surrey and Christina Raymer. This episode was produced by Alexia Russell and engineered by Jeremy Ansell. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Ka kite.